Okay, and I'm going to quickly make a cup, all being well. Let's click back to perspective, but anyway, file, save as. I'm going to save my Blender file on my desktop. So this is cup 1, save, and then file and export. So the Blender file, I can go back and refer to at any stage, but I want to export the STL, and this is now the workflow. And after T, we'll import the STL into the Cura. So STL, and same name, same place. I've only got one object, so I don't have to put the selected only, but you just must remember about the selected only and export STL. Okay, so hopefully you're on my desktop. But to use the software, once you are set up, is here's the kind of the open thing. So I can go to there, go to my desktop, and all being well, there's my cup that I've just made, and we can open that, and there we are. Okay. Now I'm down here actually getting a warning, and that is it's saying, oh, it's not watertight, and that's because it doesn't have, you know, a layer on the top or a face on the top and on the bottom, but that doesn't matter because they say this bit of software, the slicing software, it's only looking at vertical surfaces. It can't do anything to horizontal surfaces. So I've got a pre-made, you know, profile. So if I go here, I've got all sorts of different profiles. But this is the one we'll be working, and my slice height is 0.8, my nozzle size is 2, and the speed will be printing at, oh, I've actually got 28 millimeters a second. I think I might have been talking about 25, but anyways, somewhere around there in that ballpark. I then press the slice, and it's quickly done all the layers, and it's going to be about 22 minutes. This guide is pretty good, actually, on the whole. And so I can then see what a visualization of that. So when you prepare this button, you add your files, and then its preview is this button, and there you've got kind of a graphic of what's going to happen on your printer. Okay, and something I wanted to do, just point out down here, there's a little box called spiralize, and I've got that ticked. So in theory, you know, it's not sort of one layer, one layer, one layer. It's the printer is going to just slowly rise as it goes on. If I don't tick that, I often end up with quite a pronounced sort of scar each time where it rises. Now, if you're building two walls, you end up with that scar. But you know, I like the idea that we're working in clay, and you can always just take that clay away or do some repair work later on when it's leather hard. Anyway, so I've sliced that, that's all right. And I want to save this onto my SD card. So we'll be using a printer behind me. Put SD card into my laptop. And I want to save it to the file, save it to the file. So here's the SD card. And this is the cup I've just made. Are there any other cups on here? No, so I'm not going to get a clash of naming. So as you can see, this is now called a .g code file. So we put in a .stl and we now have the .g code. So save that. Now I do want to show you something, and the file that I've just made, that G code file, can be read in a text editor. And it's actually made of kind of real readable sort of language that we can read. You know, it's not gobbledygook computer language. And you know, I show it really just to try and go through right from day one when we were talking about X, Y's, and Z. This file is made up with what we call a header. You know, not that important, but it just switches on the machine. And I just like how simple that this is, that if there's a semicolon, then the little mini computer in the machine doesn't read it. And it's sort of programmed that it reads a code called a G1 or a G28, and it knows what to do when it reads G28. It means go home, basically. You know, you switched on your machine and the printhead goes up to the top of the printer. I really like the simplicity of it, that going on here, a G1 explains just where the X point is and the Y point, and this E is the rate of extrusion and sort of stuff like that. But it's, you know, enough to say you can start to visualize how the printhead is just going from one point to the next point, to the next, you know, X, Y point, and so on and so forth. Somewhere in here, there's got to be a Z, and the Z is slowly going, you know, growing up the whole time. So, you know, that is the code that explains that cup that I've just made. So for this session, hopefully my file is sitting on the SD card on the printer behind me. And then I've got the clay that I need to put into a container, and then I'll be printing onto this printer at the back here. So although I've got, let me just pull that up. I do have a printer similar to the smaller printer that you will be using, you know, that you've got, that has got the sort of the glue gun type system to it. Container. This machine here, we actually did see it yesterday, is a plastic 3D printer that I've converted over to work with clay. And the print head on there is actually the one from the Chinese machine. So I spend my time sort of putting machines together anyway. And then, I don't know how well, yeah, you can see it. So this is obviously a big wasp machine behind me. And then further out of sight is a smaller wasp machine as well. And that's those work on the principle of the bigger machine that you've got there with a big clay container. And I will show you about filling that later on. But first of all, we'll just start with this guy. So say this lump of clay, as I prepared, well, I cut it up well over a week ago, and then mixed it, and then tried a bit yesterday. I thought it was a bit hard, so added more liquid to it. And this was that sort of mixing I was trying to talk about. So you can see that it's got some strength to it. If I wobble it, it sort of goes down a bit, but it just it doesn't collapse on its own. It is a bit more than a paste, but it really sticks to my hands, and it's got a bit of a watercolor to it as well. You know, a little bit of a sheen, sort of water. So I'm just going to demonstrate the drop spike. Sorry. So, you know, the guide goes on the clay, and then I drop that into the 10 centimeter mark. You probably can't see it, but anyway, I've got a mark on there. And then literally just drop it, and then I actually give it a twist and then pull it out. And it leaves rather a nice mark. Where's the lens on this thing?
Yeah.
But anyway, it leaves a rather nice mark. And I can then put a ruler against that. And it's, yeah, about 3.4, anyway, nearly 3.5 centimeters. So that's a bit on the soft side, but good to go. Then, as I say, your big printer, you know, is going to have something like that to fill with clay, and I'll probably do that later on with time. And the smaller printer has got containers like that are actually quite difficult to fill because it's so narrow. This printer works with a container like that that's just a bit fatter and a bit bigger. You know, this size container will print for, I think, about 45 minutes with a 2mm nozzle. One of these, your size, small container, can nearly do half an hour. So you can often get two prints out of one. And these guys on this machine, they print a good hour, and I can make a reasonable sized piece out of this. Anyway, so filling these, I do this size by hand. You can also be using, you know, kind of a wooden scraper thing, taking clay and putting it in, but as I say, I'll do. And importantly, is certainly on your, well, throughout, is make sure that you're totally kind of covering all around here. You don't want to be getting any air bubbles down the side. And then my next layer presses onto that and make sure that I'm not capturing any air under there. Because what happens if you get a big air bubble, it, you know, comes out the nozzle and sort of bursts, and you get a scar on this, on the surface of your print. Again, not the end of the world, because you can patch it up later on once leather hard. With the bigger machine, you know, there will be a long pipe, and there is a pipe with this system as well. And you can often see an air bubble going down towards the print head, but you just have to live with it. Okay, so you can see here I'm kind of lifting it and making sure that no air bubbles caught. I'm using the heel of my hand to press it into there. The smaller ones, you might end up having to use the wooden tool, sort of an angle, to press it down into there. Let me get this filled up. And you can fill up containers and just, you know, because they're airtight, they can last for a good couple of days. Fortunately, though, once you have used them, you need to clean them out. Don't try refilling. Well, if it's really fresh clay, I have refilled on top of, you know, a container that's got fresh clay in it. But if the clay has got slightly hard at all, then you really need to clean out and be, you know, filling a nice clean container. All right, so I'm nearly down to the bottom. I do actually have some air bubbles just around here, but I think they will disappear. So on this system, obviously, I'm just taking off the excess clay. And then, obviously, the air is going to be in this end, and it presses the clay down. And you know, if you don't put anything on here, it goes down really nice and flat. It goes down flat, it's absolutely fine. But then when it starts getting to the bottom, the air pressure will take least resistance. And the air actually then just drills a hole through the middle of the clay and then goes down to the nozzle or goes down to the pipe. So it is important, and I'm sure you've got them somewhere, is to put a cap on. So, you know, whichever size you're using, there'll be a little plunger, a cap that goes in and that makes sure that the air doesn't sort of break through and press out. Right, so I need to clean this down now. Because on this container there's a cap that just threads straight on, whereas you'll see on the little printer you've got there, it's a different sort of system. There's not quite as much cleaning down to happen, because the cartridge goes into a metal container. But then it is important to get a good seal of air in it, so that the air doesn't leak out. On these cartridges, there's a thread at the top that I just don't want too much clay in. So this system, you'll find it out, but wherever I put it, the cartridge slips into the metal container, and then this locks on top. I just put a little bit of Vaseline around the edge here because there's a rubber seal inside, just to make sure this seals really well onto that. Where am I up to now? Right, okay. So this is actually, this will hang on the side of the machine. I will turn the iPad in a moment, and the clay feeds into the printer that way. So it has this feed pipe. I haven't switched on my compressor, sorry. It's not enough air in it. Where are we anyway? The compressor is under the table. I'll show you in a moment. So I've put a little bit of Vaseline in here to make sure that this seals nicely. Okay. Closer. I suppose you might need to see the controls as well there. I'll move it for the controls. So obviously I was printing yesterday, so I had it all nicely wrapped up. You can see it, I've just got a little bowl of water, and the nozzle has been sitting in the bowl of water, so that keeps the nozzle from drying out. And where the clay goes in, I actually just put a little bit of wet cloth in there. Right, so before this gets plugged in there, but I'm just going to make sure that the clay is extruding nicely before I do that. So now it's a matter of upping the air pressure. Okay. These things seem to lock down, so pull them out and then turn it. And that's just over 2 bars, and you can see, the clay. I trust you can see, but the clay is starting to run through there. And I tend to work somewhere between sort of 3 right up to 6 bar of pressure. As the clay gets harder, you need more pressure. Now, in your small machine, it's the amount of pressure that controls how fast the extrusion happens. In this machine and your bigger machine, it's the screw inside here that controls. So I'm now assured that the clay is coming through there perfectly all right. So I'm just going to take off the pressure and plug this into here. Okay, so this is a bit like your big machine, that there will be a big container of clay, and then the clay is being fed, and you'll find it should last 2 to 4 days. and the big machine. And at night time, all you have to do is really wrap this up well and keep the nozzle in water. And the next day, I sort of often flush it through. I just let it run, let any old file run for a while just to make sure that there's fresh clay coming through. But the smaller machine, obviously, you sort of take it apart and clean down each day. Okay, so it's a kind of press down button once, and then you get a panel of selection. So there's something called, prepare, control, print from SD card. I don't really need to do it, but just to show you, in prepare, you can go into there, and it's got a whole lot of sort of settings, but the only one I tend to use is auto home. And so the machine has risen to the top, back to main, and then I can go, so the reading through them, control, we'll go to that later on, print from SD card, and here's, I just turn it up and down until I get to my file, so J cup. And all being well, off it goes. Now, on your small printer, you will be manually switching on the airflow, and then the clay flows. So being, a start of day, I'm just flushing this through. Detail shot now. So this is the start of day. I just want to sort of make sure it's all running all right. So I can now go, I want to stop it, press down once, and then there's, on the menu is pause print or stop print. Obviously pause print is pause, and then you can just get going again at any stage. So if you want to just stop to do something, possibly poke your print, lay something onto the print, add something to the print, move the print, and then you can get printing again. So you can sort of do the happy accident or stop a print. Now, often when you go stop a print, the motors switch off and then this just falls down. So you just got to be careful if by any chance you're stopping a print halfway, have a hand ready just to stop it from dropping into the print when you press stop. Okay, and I can go prepare and auto home again. Now, the print head goes down the same distance each time. The amount that it goes down has been set inside the little mini computer here. So on your smaller machine, you'll be shown it, but there's a kind of a rubber band, and you can change the level where it starts printing with this rubber band, and that works really nicely. On this machine and on your bigger machine, it's going to be a matter of having to set it up by putting different size boards on the bottom. If you change the length of your nozzle, then you're going to have a different setting each time. So say this is a 2mm nozzle, and it's screwed into there. And I checked all this way. It's the way I work, but I've lost my boards. I put them specially somewhere. I'm just printing onto MDF boards, nothing very smart. Sometimes I will print a base. Is there a sample somewhere I can show? No. I should have, when I had the Cura open, I should have gone through it there, possibly, is that we've set this file up such that it's got no base to it, that it just starts printing the wall. So I'm going to prepare a bit of clay as base, and I would suggest this is the way you work to begin with. Let me just clear this table so I don't need this clay any longer. So to begin with, I would suggest just roll out a slab of clay if you want a base, and print onto a slab of clay. But it is very possible to, in the Cura, the slicing program, is to set it up such that it, does an extrusion of clay that makes a base. And in the settings, you want to make the base about 3 layers thick, so that it's well, sort of built, and it'll zigzag, it'll build in one direction, then build, and so you get a cross hatch into the base. And when I do a base, I do print onto a decent surface. So it's a unfired tile. It's porous so that the clay dries, and it's not too textured, otherwise the clay kind of sticks to it. So that is, a shortcoming of these MDF boards. If I roll out a bit of clay, then the clay comes away all right. But if you print onto the board, it's a bit fluffy and the print tends to stick a little bit. Now, if you're making sort of sculptural objects, or you want to make a hollow object and you don't want a base, that's absolutely fine. It's going to be, sort of quite fragile on the edge there, obviously, and you probably need to cut it off carefully. Yesterday I was printing little tests and they did just dry and they come off the board all right, that's all right. So anyway, if you are printing boards, plaster Paris is also a very good material for making, sort of boards, but it is a good idea to keep all your boards the same thickness, that these two aren't obviously, but within a group, it's best if you have the same thickness each time. You don't have to set the height again. You can just keep taking boards in and out. So what I do is I've set this up such that, I've got a board at the base to begin with, and then a little, it's actually a plastic board, but a board and a second board. And if it's set up like that, all being well, the nozzle comes down and it starts just printing at that level. Now, because this is my cup that you've seen me made, I want to just make a little base for it. So not the clay that's in here, that's much too soft. This is much more just clay out of the bag. That's why we've lost it down here a little bit. Probably not that important. Do you understand rolling out a bit of clay? And obviously, I'm wanting to keep this level, because the nozzle is going to come down and then start drawing on top of that. What I do is, I'm trying to roll it out the same thickness as this board, so that when I take that board away, the bit of clay I'm going to add on there becomes the substitute. Is that making sense? So I don't have to do any alterations. Let me just, I do like a banking card, it's a good tool. Just to smooth the base of that a little bit. That can go on there. And there's a sponge. Let's turn this guy back again. I tend to wet that in that, so quite soft clay is coming out of here, and I want to make sure it sticks to that nicely. All right, I think I'm in business. So press down, selection down to print from SD card, press down, select my cup again, and press down. I'm going to hold on to this just in case I've got my levels incorrect. Otherwise the nozzle goes into the clay. No, that looks all right. You can see on that camera. Yeah, away we go. I have a paintbrush at hand, and I just keep the nozzle nice and clean. Right, that looks absolutely fine. If by any chance, when you look at the surface that is printing, it's starting to look a bit cracked up, it often means you haven't got enough air pressure. And I'm going to up my air pressure a little bit. And that should push it through, you know, that little bit more. Lights and everything else is not very good. But what I wanted to show you was, you can see the screw busy turning around inside the print of the, I think, you know how good your images are. So you can see the screw is fair turning around. There's a rather strong overhang on that texture that is collapsing a bit. This is where, if you've got a hairdryer, it's probably time to start drying a little bit. I've got this thing. Obviously, that's a photographic tripod. You know how well you can see there, but you buy this element here that is this very small space heater that plugs into the wall. So the plug is normally kind of there, and you just push it into the wall. I've put on this little bit to actually focus the air, hot air coming down, and I've put a wire into the back.
Yeah. Stimmt. Ég bara verið með hárpússi. Já. En infrarauð sem verður með. Jú, ég líka þær. Við erum búið til svona.
Now with hot air drying, you don't want to dry too fast, and ideally you should be moving it around. So normally I don't have another tripod over there, and I would dry it a bit from that angle, and then I'd come around and dry it from this angle a bit, and dry it from that angle a bit. Now, on this shape, you probably wouldn't notice it, but if you are, say, doing a shape that's very pure, you can put the air on, the hot air, and dry it a bit, and then you switch off, and you actually find that the surface starts bending in and out with the hot and cold air. It influences quite a lot. So ideally, if you switch the air on, you should keep it going for the whole period. And that's a little why I've gone over to this fan, in that it's not too strong. I actually find hair dryers are too strong. Ideally, if possible, find a hair dryer that's got quite a weak setting to it. So it's not so much the blast. You don't want the blast to be too strong, otherwise it knocks over your print. But it's the amount of heat as well. Just a little bit of warm air does it really nicely. So, when I'm working on the big printer here, I actually have a fan, big fan heater, and I just have that running very sort of at a bit of a distance and move it around, just so there's a flow of warm air over the print. And there I may be printing for 5 hours. So over that period of time, the clay is just getting stiff to be able to build the whole time. So, obviously, I haven't done this designer cut before, and you can see that overhang is sort of falling down quite a lot, in fact. It's a bit of, it looks quite nice. I don't know how well you can see it on the iPad camera, but it's not like it looked in the Blender software. And I think you'll find that quite a lot. That is, you draw something in the software, and then you come to the actual machine, and it doesn't turn out like you expected on the machine. And you know, that's just experience, and you need to sort of go with that over time. So that's right, yeah. It's a little bit more with the big machine, but actually, yeah, well, with both machines. Both machines have got the same controller over here. And even without having to push in the button, by just turning the button, you can actually change the speed that it's printing at, all right? So I refer to it as changing the speed on the fly. So the speed that the printing happens at is set in the Cura, set in the slicing, but then even further to that, you can change it on here. So if you're busy printing and something is getting very wobbly, or for some reason the line seems to be going very thin, or basically you get into trouble, then quickly just turn down the speed. And to complicate it, intuitively, you would think to go faster would be clockwise, and anti-clockwise would be slow down. For some reason on this button, it's the other way around. I think you'll find it on both the machines. If you turn clockwise, it slows down, anti-clockwise speeds up. So I'm now running at 42% of what my set speed was. So I'm going to go back up to 100%. Right, back up to 100%, so that's where I was. And on a machine with a screw that is controlling the flow, that flow would change automatically. So in theory, here it is kept constant. With your smaller machine, the flow is happening from the air pressure, and the air pressure is not connected to this controller. So if your clay is going to become a little bit thin, if you slow down, then the clay is going to come fatter because it's running less distance as the clay is extruded. So that's another good way. If you feel, oh, it's getting all a bit delicate and it's going to break, is just slow down the machine. Okay. If by any chance on the small machine the clay is getting very fat, you then turn down the air pressure. That stops how fast the extrusion is. The only trouble is there's a slight delay in that rate because it's waiting for the bit of pressure that's in the cartridge to sort of slowly ease out. So you can't turn down the rate very quickly, but you can turn it up quite quickly. So again, if you're busy printing on the small machine and you need the extrusion to get fatter, if you just turn up the pressure, it reacts quite quickly, but coming down isn't so quick. So ideally, I'd be moving the heat around here, but there's all the electrics and everything else. If this collapses, it shows you what happens. But now, on the bigger machine, I'll talk you through it. You can go, you'll find it. It's just that the quality, it's difficult to film here. I press it once, and I get to a menu called Tune. Into Tune, and once I'm in Tune, it's then actually got the speed setting, the nozzle, it's irrelevant, the fan speed, and that's obviously all of this is designed for plastic printers, so quite a lot of it we don't use in clay printing. So fan is irrelevant, but flow is important. So there are two settings in here that we can control. One is the speed, and that we've already done just on the fly anyway, but you can do it numerically on here by changing the speed. It's gone out of it again, so I have to go back into Tune, but where I was wanting to go was to flow. So I can select flow, and flow is the speed of the screw. And I've set it up in the Cura, so it's 100%, and away it goes. But if by any chance I'm looking at that and thinking, oh, I actually need to be pumping through more clay, I can actually then set it to 110, 120, you know, and increase it. The only thing is with any of the settings in there, it's not a straight line graph. Sorry to get mathematical about this. It's more of a parabola. So if you turn it, say, from 100 to 105%, then you get a reaction. But if you wanted to double that, you go to 110%. But if you want to double that, then you have to go to 120%. And to double that, you go to 140%, 180%. You can see. So as you turn it up, it doesn't react constantly. It sort of drops away. And the same also turning down. This surface, you won't be able to see off very well. On the camera, you might be able to. I assume this camera is looking at that. But the layering is quite nice and smooth. In the big machine with the screw, you can get an instance where the screw is turning too fast. And the result is that it sets up a bit of a pulse. You know, the pressure on the nozzle starts, I think, doing this, but I can't get into the nozzle. And it almost looks like the grain of wood grain anyway. So on the surface of the print, you're getting sort of patterns going diagonally across your print. That means the screw is turning too fast. The clay has been sort of tried to force through too fast. And so you can change it on the controller here for that print that you're working on. But it's worth remembering that, and then you go back into your Cura settings, and before you prepare another file, you would go to the flow. The flow is the screw in the Cura settings, and turn that down a little bit. Now, you know, the screw in here is quite a big fat screw, and so I've actually got it on my Cura settings at 50%. I have, you know, that's what the motion screw looks like. I don't know how well that's, hey, you've seen it quite well there. But this is then actually a small screw, but this system can actually be replaced into there. And I was trying to use this screw yesterday and found that it wasn't strong enough. Even at 100%, it wasn't working awfully well. So you can see, yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say, there are just so many different dynamics to this. You want to settle down on one thing, and when it's working, just use that. Okay, this hasn't fallen over yet. On the screen, when you get to see it, over on the right-hand side, about in the middle, it actually has the time that it's been running. So this has been running for 14 minutes. So when I sliced it, I think it said it would take 22 minutes. We're 14 minutes so far. And then just to the left of that, so a little bit kind of in the middle, is a something percent. And at the moment, that's reading 84%. That's the elapsed time. So we've printed out 84% of the model, and it's taken 14 minutes. Then on the left-hand side is a percentage, and that's the speed that it's running at. And so I can change that on the button. That's the left-hand one. The middle one is the progression of the print, and the right-hand one is the elapsed time. That's what you got. So I've got, how we've seen that, a whole kind of selection of different nozzle sizes. I really do like these metal ended ones because they, you know, they seem to cut the clay really nicely. I'm not sure. Maria, have you got metal end ones?
Yes, I have some, but I haven't used them. Oh, it fell. Oh no. Look at look at the print. Oh no. Move around.
Oh well. That's all right. I've got the file. I just remake it. I sort of want to say, has anybody got a model that they can quickly email me and we can try and print it?
Yeah.
Yeah? Silence. Have you got access to that Google Drive? If you, that's right. While I'm waiting for that, obviously, on the big machine, there's going to be a big pipe that leads the clay from the clay container to the machine. When that needs to be cleaned down, I assume you already have something, but I've got a piece of wire with a hook on the end of it and a piece of cloth inside the hook. You know, I push the wire down through the clay, and then with the cloth, it would slowly get pulled through, and then it cleans out the whole of that. You could put the whole container together and switch on the air and just fire the clay through. So actually cleaning out this little pipe, I tend to use the air just to force it through. But when it comes to the end, it does tend to kind of shoot out the end. So you just got to be careful.
Okay.
All right, so I'll go over to my Cura, all being well, and share that. In the meantime, I must download that file. Yeah, I've had to download it, and then I'm looking where it is, and I'll put it on my desktop so I can access it. So in Cura, I right-click on the object here, and somewhere it's got clear build plate. And then, oh, the file thing's not there because I'm in preview view, so I have to go to prepare view. There's my little file thing. And there's our file. There we go. Brilliant. Size is right and everything. Right, it's hit slice. 23 minutes. Well, you know, we can keep going into lunch if that's all right. I could make it a bit smaller to be finished, but let's keep it like that. And, you know, we can see no problems, no overhangs, interesting texture. That's all good. Let me get the SD file.
Oh, moet skipperos.
Save to file.
Ik heb maar skippt kannski öllum moment. Það brattast ekki hvort er.
Eject SD. I'll get out of that.
Moet je dan weer ochtend?
Yeah.
Dat is great. Dit is dus echt neon. Ja.
En zie je dan misschien, dus nog met een leider, dat dan en per maar hoe komen.
Putting a little bit of clay so the board doesn't move.
Ja, dat komt de beste plöten met parallel.
see on the surface of this, there's no blemishes from uneven clay.
Oh.
There we go.
Oh.
The trouble is, I now can't send it back to you via email.